Okay. I think we are on. Yes. Check one, check two, check three, check four. We microphone check and then we check some more. What is good, y'all? There is a ton to cover. I hope everybody's having a good week. It's Thursday, April 4th. We're coming off a pretty busy fight weekend. Wasn't any of the biggest names in the game, but it was a very active fight weekend with a lot of consequence and a lot of unexpected results and kind of another fight of the year contender if we're talking Fabio Wardley versus Frazier Clark. So yeah, we're going to get into a lot of this. We're going to cover, obviously, Tszyu versus Sebastian Fundora, or more specifically, Sebastian Fundora's win over Tszyu. We're going to talk about its aftermath involving Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence, Tszyu's time to heal, Sebastian Fundora's suspension, if I read that correctly, his injury suspension. So there's a lot to unpack with that one, and we'll get into it. I also want to talk some Rolly Romero versus Pitbull Cruz. Esau Cruz stopped Rolly Romero, I believe, in the 8th round. Upheaval 963 is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Heck yeah. We're going to talk some, does Ishmael Barroso get the next shot at Esau Cruz? And you would think that if this is merit-based, that he should be the next in line, based on how he fared against Rolly when they fought, and then him stopping O'Hara Davies early in their fight. We're going to talk some Sergey Bohachuk versus Brian Mendoza. I didn't see that one coming, even though it was Brian Mendoza who took the last minute, or he was a late entry into fighting Bohachuk, whereas Bohachuk was supposed to be fighting Sebastian Fundora. So the winner in all this is really Sebastian Fundora. Not only did he get to step up his opportunity, but the way that the fight played out, he ends up walking away with 2 belts in the division. So yeah, I mean, you couldn't bounce back from that Brian Mendoza knockout loss, or that knockout loss to Brian Mendoza, any better than Sebastian Fundora did. So yeah, we're going to talk about Bohachuk's win over Brian Mendoza. Again, if they were to have both had full camps and would have had time to prepare for one another, even though Bohachuk had lost to Brandon Adams, and I know he had won a few fights since, but Brian Mendoza had just gotten that title shot against Tszyu, suffered a very bad beating in that one, but he was, before that loss to Tszyu, coming off those back-to-back knockouts over Jason Rosario and Sebastian Fundora. So you want to talk about a division kind of coming full circle. Brian Mendoza went from that to losing to Tszyu, and now losing very badly, brutal beating against Sergey Bohachuk. So we're going to get into that a bit. Erislandy Lara, a one-punch knockout over Michael Zarafa. Now, I know Michael Zarafa is not he's not a championship level fighter, but he is a high caliber fighter. And I mean, quite frankly, I just didn't expect him to get smoked by one punch in the 2nd round at the hands of Erislandy Lara. Even though Lara, in this late 40-year-old stage of his career, he's been knocking out a lot of people. You know what I mean? Like, he's really packing a punch. Not too dissimilar from how, Guillermo Rigondeaux, late in his career, started knocking more guys out, started kind of fighting a little bit less defensively, whereas before he was a defensive master. Now you can see him sitting on his punches and kind of lining the opponent up for a perfect left-hand shot. So Erislandy Lara, even though, again, he's not as elusive as he used to be, he probably can't fight a hard 12 rounds the way that he used to, but he appears to be as dangerous as ever. Benny Bronx is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Heck yeah. Yeah, good to hear from you. So we're going to, talk a little bit about Erislandy Lara, and if they're going to give him maybe a title unification, that would be nice within the division, maybe against, Carlos Adames, who's been holding that lesser WBC belt for some time, as Jermall Charlo still, years later, is still holding the actual WBC middleweight title. We're going to talk about Zurdo Ramirez becoming a cruiserweight champion with that win over Arsen Goulamirian. A lot of people thought Goulamirian was not only going to beat Zurdo, but a lot of people thought that he was going to stop Zurdo. And Zurdo, you know, he had that one fight at cruiserweight against Joe Smith Jr., another light heavyweight who was making his cruiserweight debut. So even though Zurdo boxed very well and beat Joe Smith Jr. by a few rounds, even though I thought that the scorecards were wider than they should have been, Zurdo Ramirez was taking on a whole different type of test in Goulamirian, who was pretty much a knockout puncher, is a knockout puncher at cruiserweight. And Zurdo, you could argue, has been performing as well in these last two fights as he has in his entire career. I think that these last two performances might be his two best. Like, Zurdo Ramirez is looking really good at cruiserweight. It's super technical. You saw the way that he was stepping in to kind of smother Goulamirian's punches and then step back out, showing that head movement, taking angles, catching, you know, Goulamirian with uppercuts while also working the body. Zurdo was showing us a little bit about, you know, a little bit of everything. And yes, there were instances where you see Zurdo kind of go into the ropes and it's like, don't do that. Don't let Goulamirian just let his hands go. But even in those moments, Zurdo, one, was showing that he's got a very good chin, even at cruiserweight, and would then pivot, get out of there, take the fight back to the center of the ring, and then go back to sticking to the game plan. So, yeah, Zurdo Ramirez was checking a lot of boxes. And I think that that kind of livens up the cruiserweight division as well. Baller Notes, heck yeah. Thank you for coming through. Yeah, welcome. This is your first live chat. Yeah, heck yeah. I appreciate you for coming through. See, Caesar's in the house. Thank you for coming through. Yeah, hope life is treating you as well, as well. Shoot, a spoiler alert. Well, I'll save it for the next live chat. But one of the two things that's kind of going on, just personally, is I'm in the process of maybe securing a condo not too far away. So I'm in the process of like putting offers in, seeing if the offer is accepted, counter offers and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been a handful, but hopefully it works out. So yeah, your well wishes would be very appreciated. And in my next live chat, you know, I might be breaking some other stuff. So yeah, you guys tuned into a good one, and hopefully this is a very fruitful, you know, boxing discussion, because again, there's a lot to discuss because of the action that was taking place, and plus some of the news that's broken lately. But yeah, hope you've been as good as well, Caesar. Thank you for that. Yeah, Upheaval 963. I don't know about Zurdo going up to heavyweight. You know, he might be a good bridgerweight candidate, as would, by the way, Richard Torres Jr., who fights on those top ranked undercards. He's looking pretty nice, right? I know he's like fighting lesser tier opponents, but one, he's got a lot of pop. Two, he's got a lot of craft. You see the way that he moves. He's very technical, hard hitting. I believe he's a southpaw as well, but he's been looking really good. But he's the one thing that kind of works against him is that he's on the smaller side of heavyweight. So it's hard to picture him in there with some of the 250 plus, you know, 6'5" and above types of heavyweights. But maybe Richard Torres, if he meets his match fighting one of these big, very good heavyweights, maybe he would be a good bridgerweight contender as well. But yeah, Zurdo, maybe bridgerweight, but I don't see him locking horns with some of those 260 pounders, you know, some of those guys. But if you match him up with the right heavyweights, I think that he would be a live dog, if not a favorite, against certain like heavyweights. But you know, even some of the smaller guys like Frank Sanchez, I don't really see Zurdo beating Frank Sanchez. You know what I mean? But he looked very good against Goulamirian. You know, I would want to see him against maybe like a Lawrence Okoli. I don't know about Jai Opetaia just yet. I'm curious to see how Opetaia in this rematch against Maris Briedis plays out. I see that Opetaia is a big favorite. I'm almost thinking about putting a little something on the Maris Briedis side, because I feel like the public, because of all the hype, the recent hype generated around Jai Opetaia, you look, Maris Briedis was a longtime cruiserweight champion. I believe a 2-time cruiserweight champion. He's got a ton of pride. I don't think he's that post-prime to where you should totally count him out against Opetaia. And if you look at the betting odds, you might want to consider putting something on Maris Briedis. Bobby Ungsweko, thank you for coming through. Yeah, I was going to get into that. I mentioned it at the top of the hour, the Sebastian Fundora suspension. We're going to talk about all those things, and mostly the aftermath. in the wake of Tszyu versus Sebastian Fundora. But yeah, whoever's going to be waiting for that next title shot against Sebastian Fundora is going to have to wait for some time. So, if it is Terrence Crawford or Errol Spence, do you really want to wait till like the end of the year to fight? Like Terrence Crawford, he's 36. He's going to be going on 37 sooner rather than later. I would think that he wants to get back in the ring, like straight up. So that's another thing to consider. And, for Tszyu, I'm going to, again, circle back to this. Why don't we just look? I'm gonna go down the list of what we're gonna talk about. Then I'm gonna take it back to the top. Oscar Valdez versus Liam Wilson. We're gonna get into that. Senicia Estrada versus Yokasta Valle. Fabio Wardley versus Fraser Clark. That was a fight of the year contender. Nicholas Walters. I don't know if y'all caught this, but in the middle of last week on a pro box card, he beat Joseph Adorno by decision. It's one thing if you're Joseph Adorno, who's still in his like mid-20s or 24, very young still. It's one thing if you're losing to Elvis Rodriguez or Edwin De Los Santos. It's another thing when you lose to Nicholas Walters, who was out of the ring for 8 years after being a featherweight champion, has reemerged as a lightweight. Nicholas Walters had 2 low-level fights, and then he fights Joseph Adorno and beats him. I didn't see that coming. The Axe Murderer, who I think they've sanitized his nickname to the Axe Man. That's what they were saying on the broadcast. But yeah, Nicholas Walters gets a win over Joseph Adorno, who was, again, just in there with Edwin De Los Santos, and has fought like Michelle Rivera recently and other good fighters as well. Jamel Herring just fought Jackson John England. Richardson Hitchins has an upcoming fight this weekend against Gustavo Lemos, who's a pretty hard hitter. I wouldn't totally sleep on him. Diego Pacheco is about to fight Sean McAlman. This is kind of a stay busy fight. Diego Pacheco is a huge favorite. He's one of the prospects in the current boxing landscape that I am the highest on. Diego Pacheco, like right now, he's one of my 3 to 5 favorite, like early to mid 20s prospects in the game. Like Diego Pacheco, I already see him as like a top 10 168 pounder, and I think he's going to be raising hell in that division soon. That's, of course, assuming that he's got a durable chin. He just fought Marcelo Caceres, the guy who dropped Edgar Berlanga. That's who Pacheco just stopped in his last fight. And he had some difficulty against Caceres. Caceres had some big moments, and Pacheco had to fight hard to stop Caceres in that one. But yeah, Berlanga didn't stop Caceres. Who else? I think Billy Joe Saunders has fought Caceres. But yeah, Diego Pacheco beat Caceres. He's about to be in the ring again. Sky Nicholson is going to be fighting for a vacant belt against Sarah Mahfoud. That's going to be on the Hitchins versus Lemos undercard, as will Pacheco versus McAlman. Murtazaliev is about to fight Jack Colque for that 4th 154-pound title. One of the 4 that were either stripped from Jermell Charlo or that he vacated. The last outstanding belt, because remember, who was it who just beat who just fought on that AJ versus Ngannou undercard. One of those titles was just won by the guy who I didn't think was going to win that belt, but the last 154-pound title is going to be up for grabs between Murtazaliev and Colque. And then there's that fight card, and I think that they're settling in on the date. I think it's like June 22nd or thereabout, whereas Gervonta Davis versus Frank Martin, and then David Benavidez versus Alexander Gvozdyk, the guy who used to hold the WBC belt before he lost that title in his first and only loss to Beterbiev. And Gvozdyk, who was then trained by Teddy Atlas, retired, came back, has fought some lower level heavyweights on his road back to the top. He's going to be fighting David Benavidez, it looks like, in a light heavyweight non-title clash. But yeah, let's take it back to the top. Tszyu versus Sebastian Fundora. And before that, let me get to some of your guys' comments. Let's see. Turkey is in the house. Thank you. Yeah, I hope I do secure the condo. Thank you. Cesar said, that Pitbull fight was awesome. I am glad he got Rolly the fraud by knockout. Congratulations to him. Little and strong for his weight. Yeah, very little, especially for 140. I never saw Rolly Romero as a true 140, but yeah, that was a big win for Pitbull Cruz. And it does seem like he's got a ton of fanfare as well. So I don't know who they're going to match him up with next. Again, I kind of hope that it's Ishmael Barroso. I just feel like he deserves a title shot, and that would be a pretty high action fight. You know, you've got a laser of a left hand in Barroso. I tend to think that Pitbull would eventually overwhelm him with activity, and I think that he will end up beating on the 40-something-year-old Barroso. But I think that is a fight that it would be a fair fight to make. So we'll see what's next for Pitbull. Yeah, Cesar, I agree. That Canelo fight is whack. You know, I'm trying to get up for it. Pablo B, thank you. Yeah, and welcome. Yeah, thank you for coming through. I'm trying to get up for Canelo versus Munguia, and it might be an action fight. And depending on how over the hill Canelo might be, it might be a more competitive fight than we anticipate. I think it comes down to whether Munguia can find the balance between putting his foot on the gas and pretty much burning out with too much activity too early. I think that if he goes too hard too early, I feel like it might be a Canelo versus James Kirkland scenario where he just knocks Munguia out because Munguia gets a little bit too over his skis with power punching activity and gets caught by the deadly counterpuncher in Canelo. So that's one thing that he has to be careful of. And then he also has to be careful not to totally just shell up and to start avoiding Canelo once he sees the smoke that Canelo's bringing. He can't turn into Jermell Charlo or Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. against Canelo. He can't do that. He's got to find the right balance. And I feel like if he's able to make Canelo work in the first 6 rounds, keep it competitive, fight from the outside intelligently. If you could get Canelo's respect with a jab and move a little bit and fight a more technical fight than Canelo's anticipating and kind of make Canelo come to you a little bit and make Canelo kind of work more than he wants to in the first half of the fight while restoring enough energy to put your foot on the gas in the second half of the fight, then I think Munguia's got a shot. But that's about it. I think he's got to strike that right balance. Let's see. Yeah, Pablo B. Joseph Adorno's performance against Nicholas Walters, the former featherweight champ, whose only loss was to Vasily Lomachenko. And this is the same Nicholas Walters who stopped Nonito Donaire. Nicholas Walters disappeared from the sport for almost a decade and then comes back in a couple fights later, low-level fights later. He beats Joseph Adorno basically behind a jab. He's a different fighter entirely. This isn't the same power-punching, axe murder, Nicholas Walters that we were used to seeing back in the day. No, this is a very jab-heavy, defensively responsible, measured pace, even though he was pushing the pace more than Joseph Adorno was. But yeah, bad performance for Adorno. It's going to be a long road back into title contention or anywhere near that if you're Adorno. I feel like there's some psychological or mental block with that guy. I don't know if he's gun shy. I don't know what the deal is with him, but it's not looking good. Yeah, no power, no pace, no threat. Bobby Ungsueko. Public nuisance is the moniker of a boxer in the undercard of Ryan Garcia versus Devin Haney. Public nuisance. That's an interesting nickname. Yeah, let me know what the name of the fighter is, and I'll look him up. Ventru, thank you for coming through. Heck yeah, good to hear from you. Yeah, I am close to 3K. Yeah, it's been a slow grind, and hopefully it picks up. I'm gonna try to be a little bit more active with the live chats, and I'm gonna try to vary the content up a bit more, and kind of like test drive a few different ideas and to see how that does. But yeah, we're nearing 3K. Which reminds me, smash that like button if you haven't, everybody. But yeah, thank you. Pablo B said, I think Lemos will cause a lot of troubles to Hitchins in the early rounds. The guy has power. Yeah, did you see what he did to Lee Selby, another former featherweight champion, who granted was way up out of his weight class. Lee Selby shouldn't be, up in fighting at 140. He was a 126 guy. Then he fought, he had difficult fights at 130. Lee Selby, I think, should retire. But yeah, Lemos stopped him in the middle rounds. Let's see. But yeah, let's get into Tszyu versus Sebastian Fundora. So this was obviously a bloodbath. QT, thank you for coming through. Brendan Jackson, thank you for coming through. Look, Tszyu was a big favorite, or at least a significant favorite, not a huge favorite against Sebastian Fundora. When that cut took place, towards the end of the second round, from a fan's perspective, no, you don't want the fight to be stopped. And rightfully, the conversation has turned into, why didn't the doctor or the coroner stop the fight? Of course, in retrospect, that would have been the right decision. And I wonder if they felt the pressure, meaning the coroner. I wonder if the coroner felt the pressure from Tszyu. Like, I don't want to stop Tim's, if Tszyu doesn't want to stop, this fight, I don't want to stop it on his behalf. And I don't know if the others didn't want to stop the fight because they felt pressure, being that this was like the inaugural Amazon Prime event for PBC. And this was the headliner, the main event in that first Amazon Prime card. I just don't see how you let that fight continue. It almost had shades of Badou Jack versus Marcus Brown, when Marcus Brown inadvertently like he inadvertently headbutts a lot of opponents, really. He headbutt Badou Jack, split his head. It opened up a cut that you could almost see through, and they let that fight continue. And Badou Jack was just a bloody mask for the entirety of the fight. Tszyu, as soon as you saw how that third round was playing out, and all of a sudden you start seeing Tszyu eating jabs. Like, you look at how he was fighting in the first couple rounds, he was slipping jabs. He was kind of, doing his patient hunter style of stalking Sebastian Fundora. Fundora's trying to fight technically, but he, gets caught with a nice right hand. He smiles, and you could see, yes, it is competitive. Yes, it does look interesting, but we see a lot of indicators that things are going Tszyu's way. As soon as that, that cut appears, where, by the way, they do that in the UFC a lot. Somebody will advance, they'll put up the forearm, elbow, boom, they'll slice them. It happens pretty often in the UFC and just in MMA in general. But once that cut, where Stitch Duran had a video saying that he thinks that he popped like a vein that just causes it to kind of gush blood and not drip blood, but really profusely bleed. And Stitch Duran was saying that if that was what was cut, then it's almost impossible to stop the bleeding, especially if you don't have the right tools, which he also said that they didn't use the right tools. But once you saw Tszyu lose that third round and lose it pretty badly, like he was eating clean jabs, you could clearly see that he couldn't see. You know what I mean? And so you see him spending like half the round wiping blood from his face, trying to clear his vision and trying to box while trying to clear his vision. And he was just eating punches to the point where I was wondering, is Fundora on the road to stopping Tszyu? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I thought I saw Tszyu kind of like stagger just a little bit in a couple moments in the third and fourth round. And I think he got hurt a little bit in the fifth round, but then he started to make the rounds more competitive, but I thought he was still losing the majority of them. But once you saw that his performance was slipping, it's one thing if you get a nasty cut and the guy's still performing well, then it's like, okay, maybe we let this go on. But once you see, okay, now he's dropping rounds. Now, you got to pull the cord, and you got to pull it before it starts going to a scorecard. Because even if you had Tszyu winning the first two rounds, which you could either say he won them both, or maybe even if you thought that they split rounds, well, there's a sense of urgency in pulling the plug and having this turn into a no contest. If you let it drag on too long, and then you say, well, my guy can't see, they waive it, then they go to the scorecards, now your guy has a chance of losing that fight. So you've got to be proactive in that. You've got to read the tea leaves, look at the action, see that your guy is performing way less than optimal. Like, conditionally, he's just not doing well. You've got to look out for your fighter when your fighter is, kind of showing the warrior spirit and is deciding to want to continue. I wouldn't expect any less from a guy like Tszyu. So even if he wants to continue, you've got to intervene on your fighter's behalf and say, no, ref, my guy can't see. He's getting beaten up in there. When do you see Tszyu just eating those jabs? I know he got dropped by Terrell Goucher in the early rounds, but because of the drastic difference between the first and the second round, and then what we saw after the cut, pull the plug, no contest. And you know what? Tszyu deciding to fight on and losing that fight and not only won, saving the event by agreeing to fight Sebastian Fundora, somebody who stylistically is way different than Keith Thurman. So you've already saved the event by agreeing to that within like 11, 12 days notice. But then you get in there, you've got that unfortunate event that causes a nasty fight, performance affecting cut. And then you decide to continue, so the main event could go on, and the event isn't showered with booze because they stopped the fight. And then you take the L. I feel like PBC owes Tszyu something really good on the other side of this. You know what I mean? Like, if it's not an immediate rematch, because I think that it was Likovic, Sebastian Fundora and David Benavidez, but his promoter was saying, okay, it was a verbal contract. We're going to honor that, and we're going to rematch Tszyu. Okay, if that's what's going to happen, great. I want to see that. I want to see a fair fight between the two of them. And not, again, it was an accidental thing. Like, Sebastian Fundora did nothing wrong. In fact, he fought his heart out, and he got bloodied up badly with the broken nose. But I mean, at least that broken nose was caused by a punch. That's a fight activity. That is a fight, a fight-related event. You know what I mean? That caused the cut. And so if the fight gets, stopped because of too much bleeding there, then, you've got a TKO in that, regard, because it was nothing accidental. But Sebastian Fundora fought his heart out. I think that a rematch would be equitable, and I would favor Tszyu in the rematch. But if it's not him, then he's got to get either the Terrence Crawford or Errol Spence fight, something big for Tszyu next, because he did PBC and that event 2 solids. He did it by agreeing to the fight, and then he did it in the ring when he refused to quit and to acknowledge that he couldn't see. You know what I mean? So I want them to do right by Tszyu. If they phase him out and make him, take on a fight that he really isn't interested in, and they don't give him anything good, that would be all types of wrong. I don't have any evidence that they're going to do that, even though, Errol, except for Errol Spence immediately climbing into the ring and saying, I got next. And basically the event looking like, yeah, that's what's next. Fundora versus Errol Spence. If Tszyu's fine with that, that's cool. But, if Tszyu wants to run it back, I feel like that's only fair. I could get the business reasons why you wouldn't do that. But again, I think that they really owe Tszyu in this one. But yeah, let me get to a little bit of what you're saying right here. Sueco, how much pay-per-view do I think that they did? Not much. I'd be surprised if they did more than 60, 70,000. If I was to guess what the actual numbers would be, I would guess maybe closer to 30 to 40,000. That's what I think that the paying pay-per-view audience was. It is just a total guess. If they say that it was 100,000, I mean, I don't know what to believe anymore. I mean, we have to see like hard data for anything that we hear to be credible. But I would guess that it would be 30 to 40K, somewhere in there. Let's see. Upheaval 963. Raleigh and Pitbull were carrying that card. That was a fun fight. And But Tszyu and Sebastian Fundora, I mean, that was an entertaining fight. It was unfortunate that the cut occurred in the way that it did, but I thought that was a good fight. And also, I thought that the undercard was really good. Not so much the Martinez fight, but let's see. I mean, Erislandy Lara with a 2nd round knockout. I mean, people like knockouts, and that was like a 1-punch knockout, and he lined him up nicely. But also on the free portion of the card on regular Amazon Prime, I mean, Sergey Bohachuk put a beating on Brian Mendoza. As bad as that beating that Mendoza took against Tszyu, I feel like this Bohachuk beating was worse. You know what I mean? Like, so I mean, I thought that was a pretty entertaining fight. And then they had Kermel Moton, the young prospect, super young, like 17, 18 years old or something. He was on the beginning of that non-pay-per-view part of the card. So I thought that all in all, I thought that it was like a good event. I thought that it was a pretty stacked lineup. Like if you look at that lineup versus, you know, your typical Matchroom card, I think that you had more good fights featuring B to A minus, B plus, B level fighters than you do on most other cards. Let me know if you agree or disagree with that. Brendan Jackson said Tszyu versus Sebastian Tszyu should be next. I agree, it should be next, but that also kind of raises the issue where Tszyu is going to have to recover from that cut. And also I read that there's a medical suspension for Sebastian Fundora. So he can't just hop right back in the ring. It sounds like it was like a 6 month. I think they said that he could start fighting again in like September, which I think that they mean that he could start training and sparring in September. If that's the case, then he probably won't fight again until like December. So it looks like both Tszyu and Fundora are going to have to wait a while before they get back in the ring. So at that point, what do you do if you're Terrence Crawford or Errol Spence? You know, do you just wait for one of those guys to be available and then see how the matchmaking works out between the four of them? And you could say 5 if you want to include Sergey Boachuk. Heck, you could say 6 if you want to include Keith Thurman. I actually think that it would be more fair if Errol Spence was fighting either Tszyu, but if not Tszyu, then Errol Spence versus like somebody, Keith Thurman. Run that one. I mean, Spence is coming off a loss. Keith Thurman's coming off a injury, layoff. Spence also, you know, injury if you count the eye. So I think that, I mean, now might be the time for Errol Spence versus Keith Thurman. I know that Spence shows zero interest in that fight, but if you want to talk about what's kind of warranted based on the last performance, based on where the division is and so forth, I feel like whatever Errol Spence wants, I feel like Crawford, if he wants that, if he wants what Errol Spence wants, is more entitled to it because he's the man. You know what I'm saying? Like that was a era defining beatdown, really. So I think that they need to do right by Terrence Crawford, and Crawford just needs to get back in the ring. You know what I mean? Like what you would hate to see is him return to the ring at like 37 years old and look like a diminished version of himself. Even the slightest slippage in reflexes and in cardio and all those different attributes, it has big time ramifications in the fight because it's like a game of inches. You know what I mean? It's not that much skill that separates a lot of these A minus level fighters. It's the thinnest of margins, and if you're slipping just a little bit, I mean, we've seen it. We've seen guys come back from long layoffs, and we've seen it come back to haunt them. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out, given the necessary time to heal for Tszyu and for Sebastian Fundora. Broken nose, you don't just bounce back from that. Yeah, let's talk a little Rolly Romero, Isaac Cruz. You know, Rolly Romero, look, people hate on the guy. I can see why. He talks a lot of trash. It's almost a little Blair Cobbs-ish. You know, people say Adrian Broner, but to that I would say Adrian Broner at least was proving a lot more with his win over Daniel Ponce de Leon at the time. That was a significant win. Other wins too against what's the guy's name? John Molina. That was a good win. He had a few good wins. Adrian Broner did. DeMarco, Antonio DeMarco? It was one of AB's best wins, but AB was a multi-division, his win over Paulie Malignaggi, up to the point that he lost to Marcos Maidana. Adrian Broner did a lot more to prove himself than Rolly Romero did. If you look at Rolly Romero's last few fights, a controversial win over Jackson Marinez. I thought Marinez won that fight. Getting knocked out by Tank Davis. Heck, you could argue that his best performance was that knockout loss against Tank Davis. The controversial win over Ishmael Barroso. And then now the pretty one-sided beatdown at the hands of Isaac Pitbull Cruz. I will say Rolly Romero showed me a good amount of heart. You know what I mean? He stuck in there. He tried to do what he can to survive. He sat down on a lot of right hands. He tried to hit Isaac Cruz. Isaac Cruz just has this way of kind of like tucking his chin, hiding his chin, hiding his body. He just kind of comes in almost, a slightly high guard, a little bit young Mike Tyson. I don't see him doing the same sort of Tyson-like weave, and he's not cat quick like Mike Tyson. He's explosive, but he hides his head pretty well. Even the shorter Gervonta Davis, not as short as Isaac Cruz, but shorter than Rolly Romero, Tank Davis, he was trying to land some uppercuts before he hurt his left hand. He had trouble finding the target and properly timing Isaac Cruz. So it's going to be interesting to see how they match Isaac Cruz up in the future. You know, when people land on Isaac Cruz, they're hitting a lot of the top of the head, which hurts your hand. Like hitting somebody like in the jaw, in the cheek, in the body, versus hitting them in the crown of the head. When you aim for somebody thinking that you're going to catch some jaw or chin, and you end up hitting that hard part of the skull, that's how a lot of people break their hands. Like, I mean, I think that played a part on how Tank Davis re-injured his hand against Isaac Cruz. So, I mean, that's got to be discouraging. You saw Rolly Romero moving in a way that it's not natural to him, right? He's not a natural mover. He's not Richardson Hitchins in there, but he was trying to move laterally, trying to buy time, picking his spots, and then letting some nice right hands go. They just seem to have no impact on Pitbull. So that's got to be very demoralizing. And even with that, I thought that Rolly Romero really hung in there. So look, does Rolly Romero talk a lot of trash? Yes. Does he get opportunities that his performances haven't merited? Yes. Is he shown some favoritism in the matchmaking? Yes. All those things are true. But, you know, I don't want to discredit him. Look, it's a skill to market oneself. You see a lot of good fighters who don't do a good job marketing themselves. I mean, the pound for pound best fighter in the sport, Terrence Crawford, doesn't do a great job at marketing himself. Most fighters don't, to be quite honest. So when we get a guy who's at least trying to play that part and trying to give us that, Rolly Romero, Blair Cobbs, and there are other fighters who do it to a lesser degree. Yes, we could hate on the fact that their performance doesn't cash a check, that their mouth is writing. But I don't want to I don't want to get too down on the guy, because I see what he's trying to do. If you ain't got the skills, you ain't got the skills. And I think that that's what it comes down to. And he was also concussed. I've long not liked the immediate interview after somebody gets knocked out, beaten up too badly. You saw Rolly Romero after that fight. He was being interviewed, and Jordan Plant asked him, you said you were going to knock him out. Why didn't you knock him out? It's like, what? The guy just suffered a pretty bad beatdown. Got concussed, got wobbled multiple times, got hurt in the first round, then gave us several more rounds, and then got hurt again and then stopped. And you're going to say, why didn't you knock him out? But Rolly Romero then looks at the camera, and then he says something like, he thanked the fans, and then he's like, Happy Easter, everyone. And I'm like, oh God, just like, I think he said something like, just like Jesus Christ, I'm going to rise again. Happy Easter. Yeah. I'm like, okay. He's trying. He's really trying. But I felt a little bit bad for him. The fact that he was, interviewed immediately after that. I mean, let's keep it real. A traumatizing event took place with him, and then he gets interviewed right after the fight. I've never liked that. I feel like all efforts should go into getting that fighter to the hospital. That's just me. But yeah, good win for Isaac Cruz. Again, I kind of want to see them match make by putting him in there with Ishmael Barroso. I think that should be his first title defense because of Ishmael Barroso's recent history. Let me get to some more of your comments. Let's see. Pablo B said, Tim Tszyu paid for that decision. His corner messed up, and now he's got no belt, no undefeated record. Yeah, that should have been no contest. Fundora brought nothing to the table, and it took that WBC vacant belt too. Yeah, it was all types of wrong. I kind of feel for Tim Tszyu. That was a bad decision. I get the macho side of the sport. I get the reason why you would try to stick it out. But again, when the evidence showed in the next round that he couldn't see and he couldn't fight nearly at his best, you pull the plug on that. Let's see. Ventru, there was supposed to be a rematch clause, but it turns out it was only a verbal, a verbal agreement. Yeah, Upheaval 963. It was a verbal agreement, so it's non-binding. Let's see. Yeah, Upheaval 963. Raleigh's mouth has made him a lot of money. Yeah, for sure. Las Vegas Leon is in the house. Yeah, you my dog too. Thank you for coming through. Heck yeah. David Eister's in the house. Bone Thugs. Yeah, that was my favorite group growing up. Big time. I used to watch this channel called The Box. Bone Thugs and Harmony through and through. I've met Crazy Bone at a couple different events, and I got to shoot video of Busy Bone. He came to Anaheim. I saw his live show. He did the song Thugs Cry, and I put a pretty cool live video up there of Busy Bone. It's on the YouTube channel called Seen and Heard TV. If you type in Busy Bone, Seen and Heard TV, you'll see that Thugs Cry performance. Or even if you say Busy Bone Thugs Cry live, it might be one of the first ones to pop up. But yeah, big Bone Thugs fan. I've memorized a lot of their verses from a lot of their songs. Not too ashamed to admit it. Spec Goody. Is that Spec Goody as in aspect one? Heck yeah. Hey, that's my man. Yeah. Thank you for coming through. Yeah, my favorite rapper was, okay, I got a few favorite Cannabis is definitely one of them. That whole late 90s, early 2000s era Cannabis. I memorized that Beast from the East verse. One of the best rap battle verses you will ever hear. Cannabis, Beast from the East. It was on a Lost Boys song called Beast from the East. Yeah, heck yeah. Thank you for coming through. Check out Spec's work, by the way. Insanely talented MC producer. Yeah. Check out Spec, formerly known as Aspect One. Yeah, I like Esau Cruz too. David Eister. Yeah. You don't like his promoter, the manager, Seth Gibbons. So Esau Cruz, I knew that he had a lot of fanfare. I didn't know that he had as much fanfare as it turns out he has. Like he seems like he's a rock star right now, and you're gonna hear he's gonna get a lot of support in his next fight and in his fights to come. I think he just has a very fight friendly style. He's got that cool dog mask that he comes in with, and he's just kind of built very compact, and he's no nonsense. He comes in. He doesn't have like a shimmery robe or anything like that. He's just like a come forward. He's not doing anything super fancy. He's durable. He's got a chin, and he just comes to take your head off. You know what I mean? He fights with a lot of disdain. Karma Serene is in the house. I agree. Verbal agreement. In fact, it was Karma Serene. You're the one who told me about the rematch clause when you were in Blue Blood Sports TV on the live chat there. Well done, by the way. That was tight. Check out Karma Serene's work and her YouTube channel as well. Super funny personality on YouTube as well, or not YouTube, but Twitter. So YouTube and Twitter, Karma Serene holds it down. Says some of the funniest things on Twitter. Has me rolling. But yeah, verbal agreement, it means next to nothing. Unfortunately, right? The handshake agreement, the good old handshake agreement. Wait, let me see. Yeah, I did go on that cannabis tangent. Yeah. Stan Tucker's in the house. That's my dad, y'all. Thank you for coming through. Heck yeah. By the way, my dad thought that the call was a little bit biased towards Esau Cruz. He thought that Rolly Romero was doing more than he was giving credit for, and that it was only Cruz that was getting praised for any of the work being done, where you hear like Mauro Ranallo acknowledge the punches coming from one guy but not from the other guy. And I was watching the fights with him, and I was like, I disagreed. I thought that it was evident that Raleigh's punches weren't making an impact on Esau Cruz. But we also had a disagreement in the main event because you thought that Sebastian Fundora was doing better in the first two rounds than I did. I thought that Tszyu pretty handedly won those first two rounds, even if Fundora was showing that he was boxing from the outside a little bit more than we're used to seeing. Normally, like his opponent, like Erickson Lubin, thinks that coming inside is going to allow you to get to Fundora's body, and then you could get the work done on that very long torso. But then it's almost like, the joke's on you. That's what Fundora wants you to do. So then he can let those short uppercuts and short hooks go. But we saw Fundora using his length a little bit more in the first couple of rounds against Tszyu. So it was like, okay. So I saw the strategic change, but I still thought that Tszyu won probably both of those first 2 rounds. Definitely one, maybe both. Let's see. Cesar said, Adrian, perfect example of wasted talent. I thought that he was realizing his talent up until he started to skip divisions. Remember, he won the lightweight belt, and then he jumped 2 divisions to fight Paulie Malignaggi and then to fight Marcos Maidana. I remember I was talking with a lot of my homies and friends and family and stuff, and they thought, because AB was undefeated at the time. He was, the loudmouth and all that. And Marcos Maidana was, had just lost to, I think, Devin Alexander around that time. And so, and he lost to Amir Khan in a close fight. So a lot of people thought that AB was going to win. I'm like, hey, AB is jumping 2 divisions to fight this hard-hitting Argentine. Like, this is not the one. AB doesn't have enough volume, in my opinion. And he's not like a mover. He's a little bit flat-footed. He's a counterpuncher who's like kind of timing you coming in. And he selectively lets his hands go. He wasn't as low volume as he's been in recent years. But I thought that all the signs were showing, no. Marcos Maidana is a bad matchup for AB climbing multiple divisions to fight this guy. Marcos Maidana is not Paulie Malignaggi. And even Paulie arguably won that fight against AB. That was a razor close fight. So yeah, I thought that, that was AB's undoing. And then he fought like Sean Porter and these other welterweights. And then he started missing weight against guys like Ashley Theophane. He started missing weight repeatedly, and then everything was just downhill from there. Let's see. Yeah, I was super disappointed about that cut taking place. And as soon as you saw that cut, first of all, I thought that the fight was going to be stopped. And then after seeing that 3rd round, I was thinking, okay, the fight should really be stopped because now Tszyu is not fighting well, or at least not fighting like himself. Oh, Las Vegas Leon. So you were there. Yeah, Las Vegas Leon. Check him out on social media as well. I don't know how you get all that access, but you're in pictures with like everybody. You're meeting everybody out there, and you're at all the events. Super dope. I always like checking out your content. Yeah, you said that you were there live and you felt the same way. The crowd was hollering at everything. So yeah, Isak Cruz seemed like he had the most fanfare in the building, and it sounds like you're pretty much backing that theory up. Heck yeah. Let's see. But yeah, there was other action, not only on that fight card, but Zurdo Ramirez is now a 2-division champion. He was a 168-pound champ, and then he beat Gulamarian just now at cruiserweight after beating Joe Smith Jr. Let me know if you agree with me, but I feel like Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez, his last 2 performances are his 2 career bests. First, when he outboxed Joe Smith Jr., and now when he won the vast majority of the rounds against the hard-hitting Arsene Gulamarian. Look, I knew that he had some boxing skill, but under the tutelage of Jonathan Tszyu, you're seeing so many other elements of his game. You see the way that he'll step in, and when Gulamarian did want to let some punches go, he would step in, smother, and then step out. He would do a lot of things very technically. He would start moving laterally, even within the trenches. He would let these he would take something off the fastball. So not everything is thrown with all the ferocity that he has. He takes a little something off some of those punches, but he would get them in there. He would slip little, uppercuts in there. He would throw little hooks in there. The punch placement was superb coming from Zurdo. And again, I think that was like the best I've seen Zurdo look. So again, he's been a 168-pound champ. A lot of people started writing him off when he lost to Dimitri Bivol at 175, when he challenged for Bivol's WBA light heavyweight title. But then he missed weight pretty badly before fighting Gabriel Rosado. So the event was canceled. That they were going to have that right here in Long Beach. But at that point, I feel like a lot of people wondered, should we even take this guy seriously anymore? I think that was kind of the feeling. But with these last 2 performances, it's like, yeah, there's been a bit of a rebirth. And it makes you wonder how the hell he used to get down to 168, Zurdo Ramirez. He's about 6'2", 6'3", And he's not a small cruiserweight. Yes, he looks a little softer around, the shoulders, around the waist area, the stomach area. So he's not as tight as he used to be, but he fills out, and he's a cruiserweight. He looks the part right now. And I wonder if they're going to put him in there against Lawrence Okoli. I think they're doing what's his name? Chris Billum Smith is going to be fighting Riakporhe. They're going to be rematching, so I don't think it's going to be Billiam Smith. But then, the head honcho in the division right now is Jai Opetaia, who's about to rematch Maris Briedis on that Fury versus Usyk undercard. So, and I said this in the top of the hour, look at the odds on Opetaia versus Briedis 2. Briedis is a big underdog. And I know that there's a lot of hype around Opetaia. He's young. He moves well, throws power punches. He's quick. He's got good reflexes. He's doing a lot. He's checking a lot of boxes right now, Jai Opetaia. But that was a razor close fight when he won the belt from Maris Briedis. And yes, Maris Briedis is in his mid 30s, getting into his later 30s. But I don't feel like he's post-prime to the point where you could count him out against Jai Opetaia. So look at how wide those odds are. I'm thinking about maybe even putting a little something on Maris Briedis. We'll see. But I'm not ready to write him off yet. But yeah, great performance from Zurdo Ramirez. By the way, did anybody see Fabio Wardley versus Fraser Clark? It was a little bit under the radar. It was on Peacock, which is now, that's where Boxer, the promoter Boxer with 2 X's, that's where they are holding their events going forward on Peacock. That's the NBC product, or NBC's streaming service. But yeah, Fabio Wardley and Fraser Clark, 2 kind of fringe contender, undefeated heavyweights, they locked horns, and that was a fight of the year contender. It was back and forth. You had the hard-hitting knockout artist in Fabio Wardley, who's not as skillful as Fraser Clark, but who kind of gets pissed off and turns into the Hulk at a certain point in the fight, starts letting his hands go and getting his opponent out of there. Even when he gets off to rough starts, he usually smokes his opponent at a certain time. Fraser Clark is more of a technician, so the style clash worked well. So many ebbs and flows. They both got beaten up, and I think that was one of those fights that will unfortunately diminish both guys going forward because of how brutal of a fight that was and how much of a battle of attrition it turned into. So, they have some good feeds on YouTube of that fight. So look up Fabio Wardley versus Fraser Clark if you want just an entertaining, from beginning to end, all-out war between 2 pretty good, I would say pretty good heavyweights. Give that fight a look. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but Nicholas Walters, the former featherweight champ, now fighting at lightweight, took 8 years off after losing to Lomachenko. His first and only loss, disappeared from the ring for almost a decade, 8 years, came back, had 2 low-level fights, and just beat Joseph Adorno. I mentioned that. So, if you are just joining the live chat, when you rewatch, check that part of the conversation out. Yeah, the Axe Murderer, I guess they now call him the Axe Man, is back. He's a very different fighter. He's not as dangerous as he used to be. Now operates behind a jab, but he just picked up a big, unexpected win against Joseph Adorno. And, it was kind of embarrassing because they had Paulie Malignaggi on the broadcast. This was Pro Box TV. They had Malignaggi and Chris Algieri. They both did great. I love listening to both of them when they talk boxing. Doing the play-by-play was Mike Goldberg, the guy who used to do the UFC play-by-play before John Anik took over. The guy who would be like, and here we go, when the fight starts, or it's all over after the fight ends. But Mike Goldberg, who was working for Bellator for some time, excuse me, I'm going to Marco Rubio this. But Mike Goldberg was doing the play-by-play, and he butchered Nicholas Walters' name like 6 or 7 different times on the broadcast. He called him Nicholas Waters like several times. And look, Walters, it's not a huge difference, but it just feels like amateur hour when you see that. And look, and I guess it's excusable for Mike Goldberg because when Nicholas Walters used to be a champion, when he was like stopping Nonito Donaire and beating some other really good fighters, Vic Darchinyan and others, Mike Goldberg was doing MMA play-by-play. So, okay, I get it. You weren't deep. Maybe you weren't deep into boxing in the, the the early 2010s. You know what I mean? So we'll give him a pass, but it just sounded hilarious. Just hearing him continuously say Nicholas Waters and calling him Waters throughout, the whole ring entrance early in the fight. And I think somebody got in his ear because he eventually corrected it and then corrected it from that point forward. But there was a point where he corrected it. Then he went back to messing it up again. And then he went back to correcting it again. So yeah, but yeah, you could find that fight. Pro Box TV makes their fights available on YouTube. So I was gonna call him Nicholas Waters. He's back in the mix. No, you don't feed him feed him to a top 5 lightweight, but I would be curious to see him fight maybe I don't know, like who would you match him up with in lightweight? I'd really have to think about that, but it would be somebody in like the 15 through 20 range, you know what I mean? In terms of like their, the lightweight rankings, maybe like Zaur Abdullayev, the guy who got stopped by Devin Haney. Maybe Maxie Hughes, who just took a beating against William Zepeda. Maybe Nicholas Walters versus Maxie Hughes, but I don't know. I'm just excited that Nicholas Walters is back in the mix. I was puzzled and kind of disappointed that he just disappeared after losing that really bad loss to Lomachenko. He was a part of that whole Nomaschenko where there was like 4 fighters who quit on the stool against Lomachenko. I think it was like Rigondeaux, maybe Sosa. Was it Jason Sosa? One of them was Mariaga. One of them. There was a period where several fighters were quitting on the stool against Lomachenko because they just could not figure the guy out. Nicholas Walters was one of those guys. By the way, this upcoming weekend, Richardson Hitchins is fighting Gustavo Lemos, a hard-hitting Argentine fighter. It's almost like how often do we hear that? Hard-hitting Argentine. Marcos Maidana, Lucas Matisse. The only non-hard-hitting Argentine good fighter that I could think of in recent memory was Brian Castano, but there are a lot of hard-hitting Argentines. So Richardson Hitchins is this guy, 140. He's a title. He's kind of like he's in the contender. He's in that rank number 4 through 7 in the division, but he's super avoided because he's got these long arms. He operates behind a jab, and he's just like, he's almost sweet science to the point where it's nearly unwatchable for a lot of fight fans that demand action. He basically starts dominating his opponent, and then he just starts winning every round, and he seems more or less satisfied with doing that. So Richardson Hitchins, I think, would beat a lot of top 140 guys, but he's going to have a tough time getting those guys in the ring with him. Now, I think that this fight is a IBF title eliminator, which at least in theory, because business always trumps what should be in terms of the title pictures, right? But he will be an IBF, not a mandatory, but he'll be the number 1 IBF contender if he wins this next fight. The IBF champ in the division right now is Subriel Matias. He's probably the lesser known 140-pound champ right now, but he's this Puerto Rican dude who is about as savage as they come with his fight style. Like, he takes a great punch, but he dishes out an even better punch. And there is almost nowhere to run, nowhere to hide against the guy. He's not the fastest foot guy, and he doesn't look like he's moving with a sense of urgency, but he just seems to be able to corner his opponents, kind of drag them into these phone booth style fights, and just wears them out. He was fighting a lot of those kind of Eastern European, Baltic state fighters. He had a couple really tough fights against a couple of those guys where it's like lesser name, but they're like as hard as a rock. He had a couple tough fights against those guys, and he even ended up breaking them down. You know what I mean? So Subriel Matias would be the guy that Richardson Hitchins would be in line to fight for the title against. That would be an interesting fight just based on the stylistic matchup. I don't want to totally write off Gustavo Lemos, who's, again, is about to be fighting Richardson Hitchins this weekend. He's a hard hitter, but I just think that style-wise, Richardson Hitchins is going to keep him on the outside, and he's just going to probably win like a 118 to 111 type decision. I feel like this fight has that written all over it. Gustavo Lemos, he cuts the ring off fairly well. He stopped Lee Selby, again, another former featherweight champion, but I just don't think that he's going to be able to track Hitchins down. On that undercard, one of my favorite prospects, Diego Pacheco, is going to be fighting the 168-pound, you could say prospect/contender, Diego Pacheco. He's from nearly out here. He's from South Central Los Angeles, and he's looking like the real deal, like straight up. Like he just had a good fight with Marcelo Caceres. I talked a little bit about that at the beginning of the hour, but you know, I already see him as being like a top 6. Like if he were to fight Edgar Berlanga right now, I think I would pick Pacheco to beat Berlanga. He's just impressing the hell out of me. Plus, he's what, like 6'4", 6'5", or something like that. He's just looking really good right now. And he's about to fight somebody who I expect to be clearly outmatched in Sean McAlman. That's going to be Diego Pacheco's opponent this weekend. And you can just look at the betting odds. Pacheco's going off at like a minus 1,200. So he's like a 12-1 favorite. The odds are a little bit tighter for Hitchins versus Lemos. I think Hitchins is like a 7-1 favorite or something like that. But yeah, keep your eye on Diego Pacheco. I think that he's going to have a tough time getting top fighters in the ring with him. Same with David Morrell Jr., same division. Morrell, I think, is going to have a tough time drawing some of the best 168-pounders, you know, to fight him. They announced, Tank Davis announced the weekend that he's going to be fighting Frank Martin. It looks like it's going to be like June 22nd or whatever weekend is right around that time. Tank Davis versus Frank Martin on the undercard. David Benavidez versus Alexander Gvozdyk. So anytime I see Benavidez's name or even see Canelo's name, I get a little bit frustrated that fight isn't happening. And I'm glad that Canelo is being faced with questions in every interview that he has. And I hope it stays that way, because this is one of the most obvious. This is one of those where like the whole boxing community is watching the situation and can visibly see how much Canelo doesn't want to fight David Benavidez. You know what I mean? I'll stop short of saying that he's scared of Benavidez. If you ask me like what I think, just what my gut tells me, I wouldn't say that he's scared of Benavidez. I think that he is scared of getting tired against Benavidez. Like if there was a 4-rounder, Canelo versus Benavidez, I have no doubt that Canelo could outbox David Benavidez for 4 rounds. The problem is what happens when Canelo slows down and gets tired. I think that that's what he's scared of. Like, oh God, now what? You know what I'm saying? Like, cause Canelo in his last, 4 fights, well, aside from the Jermell Charlo fight, if you look at the 3rd fight against Golovkin, the fight against John Ryder, and I feel like there was one more where we saw that. It might've been what would it have been? I don't know, but we've had a lot of recent evidence where Canelo in the middle and late rounds looks, Dimitri Bivol, of course, looks like he's visibly tired and you see reduced volume. I think that he really questions whether he'll be able to handle David Benavidez, who starts rolling downhill as the fight continues. So when you start getting into the middle rounds, David Benavidez starts putting his foot on the gas. And I think that is what Canelo is a little bit afraid of or concerned about. Whatever euphemism you want to use. Like some people will just say he's flat out scared of fighting David Benavidez, and he is ducking David Benavidez. I'm usually reluctant to use the term duck, but I feel like the shoe fits in this scenario. And I'm glad that the boxing community sees it. And I'm glad that the boxing media is unrelenting in asking Canelo about David Benavidez. And you hear his excuses and you hear David Benavidez's reactions to the excuses. I love it. I love David Benavidez. You know, he'll continuously say, it's BS. What? He said that he wants $150 million to fight me. That tells you right there that he's scared. I mean, come on. And then he's going to say that that the reason Jaime Munguia got the fight is because he was respectful. It's like, what? You know, Canelo, okay, it's PBC's fault that they agreed to that first deal with Canelo without mandating, hey, make sure David Benavidez is a part of that 3-fight deal. The fact that they said, okay, fight whoever you want, Jermell and Jermall Charlo. You could get one after the other, the Charlo special, you know what I mean? They let Canelo do whatever he wants in terms of choosing those opponents. So PBC kind of played themselves in that regard. If I was David Benavidez, I would have been pissed off right then and there. Like, wait, he's doing a 3-fight deal and it doesn't involve me? I would have started like speaking up right then and there. But for Canelo to be so adamant about fighting guys not named David Benavidez, when there isn't a public appetite for Canelo versus David Benavidez or versus Jaime Munguia, there isn't a public appetite for Canelo versus Jermell Charlo. Damn sure isn't one for Jermall Charlo. I mean, Jermall Charlo needs to take a John Ryder. I know he retired, but that level fight right now, I feel, after seeing what he looked like against Jose Benavidez Jr., until we see the Jermall Charlo of old, which I don't know if we'll ever see that version of Jermall Charlo again. We'll see. But there hasn't been any public appetite for, Canelo versus these guys. And, the Charlos weren't respectful towards Canelo. In fact, a part of the buildup to Canelo versus Jermell Charlo was Canelo saying, yeah, these guys talked a lot of, talked a lot of trash, throughout the years. So I'm going to take joy in putting a beating on them. Okay, so they weren't respectful, but they got the fight. You know what I mean? At least Jermell did. And Canelo was trying to fight Jermall. PBC said, but it's just a total cop-out when you make that the reason, especially because it's like you're willing to go back on your word about fighting another Mexican, another fellow countryman. So you're going to do that in fighting Jaime Munguia. You're going to do business with your enemy in Oscar De La Hoya. You're going to do all of these things. You're going to go cross-promotionally when you've got this deal with PBC. You're going to work with DAZN. You're going to do everything. You're going to twist and contort to stay away from David Benavidez. And I'm just, the only satisfaction that I'm getting is the fact that if that's happening, which it appears to be, that at least it's not going unnoticed and that people aren't buying what Canelo's selling right now. And I hope he continues to get asked about David Benavidez. I don't care if he's tired of, answering those questions, but until he gets it, look, I have doubts whether that fight ever happens now that Benavidez is going to be going up to 175. Because if Canelo wasn't going to fight Benavidez at 168, he damn sure, I don't see him fighting him at 175. David Benavidez is only going to get more comfortable. I mean, David Benavidez, as it is, I feel like he has to shrink himself down to 168. So once he goes to light heavy, I don't see him going back down. That's where you start running the risk of, what happened to Roy Jones Jr. when he came back down from heavyweight after he fought John Ruiz to come back down. He struggled in that first win against Antonio Tarver, and then he got knocked out in the rematch. So Roy Jones, we never saw prime Roy after that John Ruiz fight, and then he came back down to 175. We just didn't. But it's just one of those scenarios where everybody, or damn near everybody, if you do a poll, 80% plus will want Canelo versus David Benavidez. And those that don't want that, you would probably get more people wanting Canelo versus Terrence Crawford. That was the only acceptable answer to not fighting David Benavidez that I would have understood from Canelo. If you're going to do legend versus legend, you know what I'm saying? Like, okay. But then he's saying, it's too big of a size gap and I'm not going to get credit. Well, you just fought Jermell Charlo. That didn't seem to be a problem. So I would have been okay with generational great Canelo versus generational great Terrence Crawford. I would have said, okay, if Terrence Crawford wants to jump 3 divisions, do something crazy and go way up there, I would give that pass to certain legends. Sugar Ray Leonard, you want to go up and fight Donnie Lalonde? Go ahead and do it. Canelo, you want to go up and fight Dimitri Bivol or fight, whoever? Go ahead and do it. There's a club of fighters when you get to that level of greatness where I feel like the public will say, and see, like, I wonder if Terrence Crawford can do it. Terrence Crawford would have a height advantage and a reach advantage, and I just don't see Crawford fighting the Jermell Charlo style of fight against Canelo. I don't see that. So something's got to give there. So yeah, I would have been interested in seeing that. But by and large, the boxing community has been wanting Canelo versus David Benavidez. A lot of people wanted that since Canelo, first stormed the gates at 168. Not so much when he first fought Rocky Fielding and then came back, or not that time, but when he came and fought Callum Smith, Abney Yildirim, Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant, around that time, when to David Benavidez played himself by losing the belt twice without losing a fight. So he didn't have a belt. And a lot of people thought that it was a calculated move to take all the belts when David Benavidez ain't got one. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was a theory that before all this, I wasn't agreeing with that theory. I was saying, no, I think that if Benavidez had the belt, the WBC belt, I think Canelo would have fought him like he fought Callum Smith. Now, I can't say that I believe that. You know what I'm saying? Like, so yeah, again, anytime I see Benavidez, he's about to fight Gvozdyk if these reports are accurate. Anytime I see Benavidez's name, Canelo's name, Munguia's name, I get a little bit frustrated. And again, what do you do if I'm going back to the Terrence Crawford thing, but are you going to wait for Fundora and Tszyu to heal from their head cut and from their broken nose and not fight until the end of 2024 at 36, 37 years old? So let me get to some of what you're saying. Yeah, I definitely got on a tangent right there, just talking Benavidez and Canelo. You know, I could talk that one until I'm blue in the face, and I almost did. Yeah, Benji Tucker, my cousin. Heck yeah. We talk a lot of boxing too. Yep, yeah, that mallard duck is accurate. So you say Canelo's entire legacy is called into question. I think you've got different schools of thought there. You know, I don't want to litigate the whole thing, but there are asterisks next to a lot of Canelo's most meaningful fights, right? You know, there was the clenbuterol during the Golovkin era, right? There was, I believe, some sort of a catchweight against Arislandi Lara. He was reeled into Floyd Mayweather's game when he fought Floyd. It was Floyd who made him come down an extra couple of pounds. But yeah, if you look deeply into Canelo's history, there are a lot of instances where there was some funny business weight-wise or some other condition that just wasn't a totally on the up and up fair type of fight. You know what I mean? There is a lot of that in Canelo's fight history. But there are other guys that I thought that I was impressed that Canelo decided to fight. You know, when he decided to fight Callum Smith, granted, it was relatively short notice. You know what I mean? He came back from that contract dispute with Golden Boy, fought Callum Smith, and Callum Smith didn't have a lot of time to, you know, shrink down with his 6'3" self down to 175. So, you know, there is that, you know, or I'm sorry, to 168. But to call his whole career, look, the thing about Canelo that's interesting is he became a superstar early in his career. A lot of star fighters, well, some star fighters are stars pretty young. Gervonta Davis, right? Other fighters aren't stars until later on. Floyd Mayweather. So Floyd Mayweather wasn't allowed to start calling the shots until he had those king-making performances against Oscar De La Hoya, right? Then he was able to call the shots. Canelo, because he was kind of like the favorite son of Golden Boy Promotions early in his career, was kind of given a lot of like star names that were past the prime. You know, Kermit Cintron, Shane Mosley, the aging Carlos Baldemir. There were some guys that Canelo was lucky enough to get in the ring with at a time where, yeah, beating Shane Mosley matters, but we're talking like late 30s Shane Mosley. You know what I mean? So it was the right kinds of fights to build your star power. So Canelo was able to call a lot of those shots sooner in his career than a lot of other even star fighters were able to. Las Vegas Leon, yeah, you heard that too with the Nicholas Walters Waters. That was funny. Let's see. Oh, Sector MMA is in the house. Thank you for coming through. What is the biggest fight that could be made in boxing? I hate to say it, but we might find out with that Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul. We'll see. We'll see. And I know that that's not a pay-per-view, but it's Netflix. It's going to get a ton of views. Like, who won't be watching? And let me know if you won't be watching Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul. But I assume that even boxing purists will at least tune in. You know what I mean? But that might be it. But okay, that stuff aside, the biggest fight that could be made in boxing, maybe, okay, so Terrence Crawford, or Canelo's the face of boxing. He still is, I believe. He's still the most bankable fighter in the sport. AJ would probably be number 2, maybe Gervonta Davis number 3. Or you could argue about 2 and 3. I would say Canelo versus Benavidez would be a big fight. I think Canelo versus Terrence Crawford might be a bigger fight. Maybe Canelo versus Crawford. I still think that, I think that Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury would be there. Like if Fury beats Usyk and then they do Fury versus Joshua, maybe Fury versus Joshua. That's one of them. When you bring Gervonta Davis, who's one of the most bankable fighters, when you start talking about Tank Davis versus, I don't know, Devin Haney, Teofimo Lopez, I'm just thinking of the biggest fights that could be made with Tank Davis. He already fought Ryan Garcia, but I don't see those fights. Tank versus Haney, Tank versus Shakur, Tank versus you name it at 140, at 135, wherever. Tank versus William Zepeda. I don't see any of those fights being as big as like Canelo versus Benavidez, Canelo versus Terrence Crawford. So I would go with either Canelo versus Benavidez, Canelo versus Terrence Crawford, or Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua. I feel like those would be the biggest fights in boxing. Jay Foreman, heck yeah. What's good? Thank you for coming through. GWK said, I think 2 things. Canelo clearly dislikes David personally for whatever reasons, and also he thinks Benavidez is just too big for the weight to fight, or that he's some kind of a weight bully. Well, okay, but Canelo was about to go up and fight Makabu at cruiserweight. At least he was entertaining it, right? He fought Dimitri Bivol. He wants to go up and fight Dimitri Bivol again at 175. You know, he was talking about wanting to fight Artur Beterbiev before he fought twice. He talked about it before he fought Dimitri Bivol, and recently he was talking about wanting to fight the winner of Beterbiev versus Bivol, which I can't wait. I can't wait to talk about that fight. I can't wait to break that fight down. But you want to talk about one of the best fights that could be made in boxing? It's that one right there. Yeah, Canelo, a lot of what he says, it doesn't hold water, because you see other instances where he goes back, where he does something contradictory to it. I mean, again, just in recent months, he was talking about, he gave a press conference to say that he wasn't fighting a Mexican opponent. But now he's going to make up excuses and reasons why he is. It's because the guy was respectful. He said he had the nerve to say it's because Munguia earned it. He proved himself. Who's proven themselves in that division more than David Benavidez? So, yeah, people aren't buying it, though. But, yeah, we're about to wrap this one up. By the way, what is your guys' favorite fight right now on the boxing calendar that is currently scheduled? What is the fight right now that is scheduled that you are most excited about? And by the way, I also want to do some like a video on the best promoter per division, because certain promoters are strong in certain divisions while lacking a deep roster in other divisions. And it's kind of interesting when you look at it, because it seems it kind of changes over time. Like at 140, it was Top Rank who were holding most of the cards. They had Josh Taylor. They had Jose Ramirez. They had some of the best guys at 140. Now it's pretty much Matchroom, right? Matchroom's got Sabriel Matias. Matchroom's got Devin Haney. Well, do they? They kind of, right? It's always kind of with Devin Haney. But Matchroom's holding a lot of the cards at 140 now. Yes, Top Ranks now has Teofimo Lopez, but you see the power brokers and the divisions that they really thrive in kind of change over time. Sometimes it's as fighters go up in division. Sometimes it's as fighters retire or big fighters take losses, so then they get knocked down the pecking order. But I want to do a video about that somewhat soon. Upheaval, you said Juan Estrada versus Bam Rodriguez. That is a good fight. That is a really good fight. Bivol versus Beterbiev too. Las Vegas Leon also said Bivol versus Better BF. Yeah, okay, Benji, you bring up a good point. You said you can't avoid someone that campaigns at 168 when you are undisputed. Yeah, the sanctioning bodies all kind of stand down when it comes to Canelo. Even like the IBF that gets stingy at some times and starts to adhere to the letter of the law. They even say, whatever you want, Canelo. And you just see I was just wishing that the WBC would have mandated that Canelo fight David Benavidez. But Mauricio Lara, he might be well intentioned, but sometimes he's just so full of it because he just makes like some of the most nonsensical arguments that back up some of the WBC's moves, and there is no justification for not mandating Canelo versus David Benavidez because it's not like Canelo's fighting. He's not unifying anything else. He is literally cherry picking his opponents now. You know what I mean? Like, without having to defend titles against any of the guys that the sanctioning bodies say, yeah, you are our number one. He's not having to meet any of those obligations. I mean, look, I know that John Ryder was a mandatory, but that was almost like I feel like that was one of those manufactured mandatories where a promoter will align with the sanctioning body and elevate a guy so that they could have that sanctioning body's title fought for on their platform under their promotional banner. And I feel like some of that happened with John Ryder. You know, I know that he beat Zach Parker, you know, whatever, but I don't know, like when the power brokers back up the star fighter who doesn't want to take the fight, if Canelo would have relinquished the belts, that's one thing. But the fact that he's still holding them, nothing is right about that, because there is no argument you can make that Jaime Munguia is more deserving of a title shot of any belt than David Benavidez. And it's like, even if you threw up like the fight odds, like what the odds would look like for Canelo versus Benavidez versus a Canelo versus Munguia fight, well, you know, you could look at the Munguia versus Canelo odds right now. Canelo versus Benavidez would be nearly 50-50. Maybe Canelo as a slight favorite, but for a guy, Canelo saying that Benavidez doesn't bring anything to the table and that Jaime Munguia has proved it, well, then why don't the betting odds reflect that? And the odds really don't lie. Like sometimes, you know, there will be upsets that happen, but if you think that you're smarter than the market, then you should be making money because you know better than the market. I'm not foolish enough to think that I can beat the market in most cases. I know that the more I gamble on these fights, as much as I think I know, I'm going to end up losing some money, straight up. You know what I mean? Because the truth is, these casinos and these sports books and these odds makers, they more or less get it right in all sports. In all sports. You know, fight with them and take them on at your own risk. You know what I mean? But David Benavidez is the scariest fight out there in the division for Canelo, and everybody who pays attention to boxing can clearly see that. And even the guys on, you know, the DAZN guys like the Chris Mannixes and so forth, even they can't make the argument that Munguia is the best fight for Canelo. There's no getting around David Benavidez right now, but now there's plausible deniability because Benavidez is going up to 175. So now Canelo could say, "Hey, I was gonna fight him. I was gonna fight him later on this year, but he went up to 175." I could see that. I could see that happening. Yeah, Las Vegas Leon. Yeah, WBA started to get rid of that. You know, they started cleaning up their sanctioning body, started eliminating those regular belts, and then started issuing some more of them. So yeah, they went back on that quick. When they probably, I don't know, started like losing money. It's like, you know, we could make more money on this fight if we put a belt in there. It's ridiculous. Let's see. Yeah, Jay Foreman said Benavidez brings more of a perceived threat, hence more attention and more money. Yeah, more because the public fight fans want to see Canelo in a tough fight. They want to see Canelo fighting the best. Now, if Canelo wanted to admit, like, hey, I'm not what I was, like, I'm not in that part of my career anymore where I want to fight the best. Look, then fight whoever you want. Drop the belts and fight whoever you want. But the excuse, he's saying, look, He's saying, I've been doing this my whole career. You guys, I've been taking on all the fights that you wanted me to take. I fought Austin Trout. I fought Daniel Jacobs. I fought Floyd Mayweather, Triple G, Callum Smith. It's like, first of all, most of the guys that you're naming, there wasn't a public wanting of these different fights, of most of them. There was for Triple G and a couple of others, but not most of them. Like, nobody wanted you to fight Alfredo Angulo. Nobody wanted you to fight Chavez Jr. A lot of these fights, we were like, okay, whatever, right? A lot of them, same thing, but Canelo saying it will be no different if I decide to fight David Benavidez. There will always be that next guy that you guys want me to fight. And to that I say, no, I disagree. Like, I don't think most fight fans, if Canelo fought Benavidez and beat Benavidez, I think we would be like, yo, if you want to ride off into the sunset, man, you just did the damn thing, win or lose. I don't think we would immediately pivot to, oh, but you didn't fight David Morrell Jr. You didn't fight Diego Pacheco. You didn't fight, Christian Mabili. I don't think we would say, no, the boogeyman, when you unified the titles and became undisputed, the unfinished business was always David Benavidez. That was always the guy. So if he fights him, I think most of us would back off and say, I think we would applaud Canelo and be like, yo, man, job well done. So I think Canelo's wrong. And I think that he needs to know that, no, I don't think the public is going to say, well, what about that guy? Because I don't think that the public would do that to Canelo if he fought David Benavidez. Hot Fast with Robert Reese is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Yeah. We talked a bit of Pitbull versus Raleigh and the bad decision to interview Raleigh after the fight with the, Happy Easter. But a lot of people wanted to see Raleigh, get a comeuppance. A lot of people don't like Raleigh. I don't dislike Raleigh. I get why people don't like Raleigh, but I don't think we should knock him for bringing more entertainment. It's just that his skills don't match his mouth, straight up. People 963 said Benavidez is making a mistake and moving up to 175. That's exactly. I was wondering, why is Canelo waiting him out? I was thinking like, damn, it's not like that fight is going to get any easier for Canelo. The older Canelo gets, but then it's like, oh, that's what he's doing. He knows that this guy can't stay at 168 too much longer. He's probably struggling to make 168 as is. He's on borrowed time at 168. He's not going to like wait him out in the way that people usually wait people out in terms of aging. No, he's going to wait him out, as in he can't make weight anymore. That's what he's doing. And yeah, now David Benavidez kind of played into that. But I don't think that David Benavidez, even if he wanted to stay at 168 for like 2 more fights, I don't necessarily think that he could. Like, he's getting into like his mid to late 20s. He's not like in his early 20s anymore. And that staying that low in weight when you're that naturally big, it just gets harder as you get into your late 20s and early 30s. So I think that the writing was on the wall to begin with. And yeah, I think Canelo, unfortunately, waited him out. Jacob Perez is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Even though Munguia isn't Benavidez, the fight, they fight very alike. Therefore, depending on how good Munguia performs, we have an idea of how good Benavidez would also do against Canelo. Let's see. They both throw a lot of volume, but I think that they throw different types of volume. I feel like Munguia throws punches at times that are a little bit more convenient for the opponent than when David Benavidez lets his hands go. They both have good motors, and yeah, they both are pretty durable. I think we've seen Benavidez get dropped earlier in his career. We've seen Munguia get wobbled, but I guess, style-wise, Munguia is starting to box better. Like, he boxed well against John Ryder compared to how he normally boxes. Benavidez, I feel, is a little bit more deliberate in his range control. I feel like he's a little bit more like here when he's at range. Like, he kind of keeps his hands like around his like stomach area, or sometimes he'll kind of hold him here. So he'll be here and he'll kind of like be a little bit more like evasive, and he'll be more satisfied with handling you from the outside as he then starts to work his way in and then starts to up the volume. I feel like with Munguia, he goes from 0 to 100. Like, I'm out here, boom, boom, boom. I'm going to throw like a 3-punch combination. Munguia or Benavidez is a little bit more like, I'm going to jab a bit, jab to the body. He's a little bit more of an early round sweet scientist, and then he starts getting going into the middle rounds. Whereas Munguia, again, a bit of a faster starter. But I get what you're saying. They do have some similar attributes. But I also think that if they were to fight each other, Benavidez and Munguia, I don't think that goes well for Munguia. I really don't. Hot Fast for Robert Reed said, let me ask you this. What about Jaron Boots Ennis fighting for the vacant IBF belt in the weight class ahead of him? So Ennis going up to 154 to fight for the IBF title, which is, okay, it was the WBA that was settled. So the IBF belt is going to be fought for this weekend between Murtazaliev and Jack Culcay. Yeah, it's Murtazaliev versus Culcay for that 154 IBF title. So if Ennis chooses to go up and fight the winner of that, that's not a bad decision because then you've got a belt. But then it might end up being like a lot of other avoided fighters that we see who win a belt. And it doesn't matter that they have a belt because even their mandatories don't want to fight them. Like when Ryan Garcia was Devin Haney's mandatory back in the day when Haney just had the WBC lightweight title, or when Demetrius Andrade had the WBO middleweight title and Jaime Munguia was his mandatory. He wasn't interested in challenging Andrade for that belt, or at least his either him or his promoter weren't interested. I feel like we would get some of the same avoidance with Jaron Boots Ennis if he wins the 154-pound IBF belt. But the good news for Ennis then would be he's in the division again with Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford. If they do, hang around at 154 and look to campaign or pick their fights, in that division. So it wouldn't be the worst idea. And I don't know how much longer Boots can make 147. He's a very big welterweight. But I mean, we're seeing Janibek Alimhanala, who's got the WBC and WBA belts at middleweight, and there are no other champions in that division that seem to want to fight him. So wait, does he have no? He doesn't have the WBC belt. He's got the WBA belt and another belt. I can't remember which, but he's got 2 of the 4 belts. Jamal Charlo has the WBC belt in that division, and Carlos Adames has the lesser WBC belt in that division. But yeah, Janibek is having a tough time getting a meaningful opponent in the ring with him. MAW is in the house. Thank you for coming through. Yeah, smash that like button if you haven't. Thanks. Heck yeah. Good to hear from you. But yeah, we're wrapping this one up. Yeah, we went through a lot. We talked some Tszyu versus Fundora, Raleigh versus Isaac Cruz, Boha Chuck versus Brian Mendoza, who has now taken back-to-back beatings, and I really wonder what the future of his career is going to look like. Brian Mendoza, I would almost recommend him taking a lot of time off. He probably shouldn't have taken that fight on short notice if he wasn't training for a fight. You saw how blown up the side of his face got too. It looked like he was attacked by a swarm of bees. It was very bad. We talked some Arislandi Lara knocking out Michael Zarafa, Zurdo Ramirez winning the title off Gulamarian. We talked a little Oscar Valdez stopping Liam Wilson. That's another guy who I'm wondering whether, like, what the future of his career looks like. I don't know if you saw Valdez versus Wilson, but in the post-fight, I don't know how Liam Wilson used to talk back in the day. And it wasn't his Aussie accent that made me think this, but I thought he was really slurring his words. Like, he sounded a bit punch drunk, and his fight style, like, I felt like if he was boxing Valdez a little bit better from the outside, he didn't have to like trade hooks with the guy as much as he did. And Valdez, if he could do anything, it's hit hard. And so I just thought that was a recipe for disaster eventually. I thought that it would be an interesting competitive fight. And if Valdez was going to be like if he was a diminished version of himself, then maybe Liam Wilson would have won. But if Valdez was still Oscar Valdez, I'm thinking like, damn, you're going to get caught like at some point, because I trust Oscar Valdez's chin more than I trust Liam Wilson's chin. And yeah, like it backfired on Liam Wilson. And now, you know, I know he had a couple wins in between the stoppage loss versus Navarrete and now getting stopped by Oscar Valdez. But that's two pretty bad beatings that he's taken. So, you know, like Brian Mendoza, Liam Wilson might want to take some time off. And I really think that they should take a close look at him cognitively, because again, this is just a layman's, you know, observation. He didn't sound good in that post-fight in-ring interview. Again, I don't like those. I just got stopped and now I'm going to do an interview in the ring instead of going to the hospital immediately. I didn't like that interview, and I don't think he sounded good in that interview. Senicia Estrada just became undisputed as well with that win over Yokasta Valle, where Yokasta Valle had an early round cut over her eye. And Senicia Estrada, she boxed really well, especially in the late rounds. And again, if you haven't seen the Fabio Worley versus Frazier Clark fight, that is a fight of the year contender. Jacob Perez asked the question, Shakur versus Devin, almost the same style. Shakur Stevenson's a southpaw. You know, people were hot on the Shakur bandwagon until that, you know, fight against Edwin De Los Santos, which I'm not too, I wish Shakur would have run it back against De Los Santos. That's what I think he should have done for his next fight. But a lot of people, I think a year to 2 years ago, would have picked Shakur over Devin Haney. Even though it was always kind of like the other guys, Tszyu, Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, they would always be like in a division, and then Shakur would get near that division, then they would move up again. Shakur's always been like a little bit young, younger than a couple of them, but always a division behind them. But I would say Devin Haney, you know, like if they were to fight. And I know that I was talking with Benji Tucker in this chat about that fight, and I know Benji Tucker would pick Devin Haney over Shakur Stevenson. I don't think anybody's unbeatable. I think he's very, very difficult to beat. But, I mean, Edwin De Los Santos wasn't far from beating Shakur Stevenson in my book. But, yeah, hey, Upheaval 963, thanks for that. Said good live hook. Yeah, we're going to wrap this one up. Yeah, if you didn't catch, like, you know, we covered so much. Feel free to go back and watch. You know, we discuss one topic to the next. And I just want to thank you guys for coming through. I'm going to be, I know I've said this in the past, but I'm going to try working on different styles of content leading to different fights. Like I want to do divisional stuff, but we'll see. I mean, obviously I'm going to keep on doing like the fight previews and all that. I'm going to keep doing the live chats as I, you know, very much enjoy those. We're nearing 3,000 likes or 3,000 subs right now. So I'm going to see if we could kick that into higher gear as we move forward. But yeah, it was a bad day for Aussie boxing. It was shaping up to be a great one. But yeah, between Michael Zarafa getting knocked out, Liam Wilson getting stopped, and Tim Tszyu, you know, suffering that disaster of a cut, which led to his first professional loss. Rough stuff. Yeah. Oh, thank you for that, Jacob Perez. I appreciate that. And thanks again for coming through. And MAW, thanks for coming through. Upheaval 963, Hot Facts with Robert Reese, Jay Foreman. I know Stan Tucker, my dad was in the house. Benji Tucker, my cousin, was in the house. Brexley, I know she's in the house. Love you, Brexley. Las Vegas Leon, thank you for coming through. GWK, thank you. Heck yeah. Sector MMA. Yeah, Bobby Angsueco, thank you for coming through. Karma Serene, Brandon Jackson, Spec Goody, thank you. Caesar, thank you for coming through. David Eister, thank you for coming through. Edward Espinoza, my bad. I miss you, man. Thank you for coming through. Yeah. Ventru, thank you. Juan Mendoza, thanks for coming through. Pablo B, QT. Yeah, this was a fun one. Yeah, it was a busy weekend of boxing last weekend. Francisco Velasquez, thank you for coming through. But yeah, until next time, Turkey, thank you for coming through. Baller Notes, thank you for coming through. And you said that this was your first live chat checking out. Thank you. Benny Bronx was in the house a little bit earlier. Yeah, thank y'all once again. And then until next time, oh, by the way, again, Richardson Hitchins is fighting Gustavo Lemos this weekend. Diego Pacheco fighting Sean McAlman. I look at that as kind of being a tune-up for Diego Pacheco. Sky Nicholson is going to be fighting for a vacant WBC title. I think, what is it, the strawweight division? Wherever Amanda Serrano was last operating, she's going to be fighting Sarah Mahfoud. And then Murtazaliev is going to be fighting Jack Kulke for a vacant, I believe, IBF 154-pound title. But yeah, until next time, guys, I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.